Minister for Gaming, Tony Robinson. Thank you, Tony.
I was appointed the Minister for Gaming in the second half of 2007. And the three major decisions I took early on after becoming the Minister are helping reshape gaming in Victoria and are the basis of what Labor wants to achieve should we be given the opportunity again on Saturday. The first decision was to adopt a pre-commitment regime. We announced that in March 2008. We were the first state to do so. In fact, I think we're the only state at this point to do so. And we laid down our plan to Parliament in 3 stages. And the reason's pretty straightforward. I think everyone here will understand. Pre-commitment gives players, consumers, greater control, greater choice. They can set themselves a play, time and a loss limit before they start playing. It's a common sense approach. It's something that technology is increasingly allowing, and it's something that I put forward actually as a backbencher, I think in 2006. The second decision we announced at the same time, early 2008, and that is that we would see ATMs pulled out of gaming venues, of all parts of gaming venues, currently banned from the gaming floor. But we said that would go further and it would be all parts. And again, the explanation's quite simple. Lots of people who experience problems go along with the intention of only gambling for a short while to lose this much, spend this much time. But their temptation of a hole in the wall, that they can go along and anonymously get more cash, is too great, so they succumb to it. Removing ATMs is a perfect complementation to pre-commitment because for many people it will mean their first pre-commitment decision is made before they even leave home, and that's got to be a good thing. The third decision, we announced this a month after those first two, was to strip TATS and Tabcorp of their gaming licences when those licences end in 2012. And we took that decision because we believed it wasn't, or what was good for the companies was not necessarily good for the broader community. They had it pretty good. They were able to set up the industry and run it with virtually no restrictions through the 1990s, and player losses at the end of the 1990s were increasing by 16% each year. 16%. And government, I think people look back and say the government didn't do nearly enough. It was pretty much a hands-off policy. These 3 key decisions were followed by something else last year that didn't get much publicity, but it goes to this very point that Tim was making about bipartisanship. The legislation allowing for the transition away from the duopoly to industry ownership, so pubs and clubs would take ownership, including the ATM ban, including pre-commitment, including a few other things such as new signage requirements and limits on how big sports clubs' gaming activities can be, went to the Parliament. And in the upper house we have a kaleidoscope of parties in the upper house, and guess what? The legislation went through the upper house unanimously, supported by the Liberal Party, Labor, the Nationals, the Greens and the DLP. Now I know it's not in fashion to go out and celebrate those or to mark those occasions where you do get consensus and bipartisanship, but that's what happened in the Victorian Parliament. I know we celebrate rancour and division. Well, we actually achieved something in the middle of last year. And I raise that point because I agree with Tim Costello. We need to get more of that going forward if we want to achieve what everyone here wants to achieve, and that is to do more for those who are most vulnerable. The consensus we've achieved in Victoria is important for another reason, and that is you will see some commentary. Most of it, I'll say, is from north of the border about how reform of gaming is the end of civilisation as we know it. The sky's going to fall, we'll all be ruined, isn't it terrible? And I say to you, the consensus we've achieved in Victoria, both at Parliament and through things like the Responsible Gambling Ministerial Advisory Council, where we get participants, industry figures together, actually extends to the industry itself. They understand now that change is here and change is going to be here. And that's a good thing. I can say we've brought the industry with us. Into next year we're going to see a lot more activity. We're going to see the Gillard-Wilkie agreement come to fruition, and Victoria supports that very strongly. Very, very strongly. We'll see our Responsible Gambling Advocacy Centre get up and running. We'll see more work out of the Problem Gambling Research and Treatment Centre. We'll see the Responsible Gambling Ministerial Advisory Council continue its good work. We'll see our highly effective responsible gambling TV advertisements refreshed again based on very good research, and they do make a difference. I don't think it's a matter about putting pokies on the agenda. I think it's about keeping them on the agenda, because they certainly are on the agenda in Victoria. I want to finish by one thing. If you believe in national standards, and we do in Victoria, we've been at the forefront. We're out there on pre-commitment well before that agreement was signed by the federal government and Andrew Wilkie. There's one big problem. I'll finish on this note. 3 words. New South Wales, home to half the country's poker machines. A state where you don't get any dialogue, you don't get meetings like this. A state where the industry's got the arrogance to go up to the opposition leader, who might be Premier one day soon, and sign a tax reduction agreement for pokies in New South Wales. We all have some work to do on New South Wales. They are years behind us here in Victoria. So I'm going to finish by thanking you for the opportunity to be here, and I think, Dennis, I've got to take 2 questions.
Given what you've said, Tony, if in 2011 poker machine losses in Victoria run in the 2.5 to 3 billion range, and 50% of that comes from problem gamblers, will you resign as a failure?
Poker machine losses actually fell by 4% last year. So in the contrast to the last decade, we saw losses increasing by 16% per annum. They actually fell by 4%.
4%?
Well, by rights, if nothing had changed, they would have gone up 3 or 4%. A whole lot of indices that show that the expenditure by Victorians on gambling as a percentage of their household expenditure is falling, and that's a good thing. We earned less out of poker machine taxes as a government last year, but you're not seeing me, crying tears about that. That's a good thing. It's a good rebalancing. What would happen next year if poker machine losses increased along the lines you're saying? Well, I'd be surprised if that happened. Going forward, when our ATM ban is introduced and when the pre-commitment standards are adopted, I would expect you to see further corrections in gambling expenditure.
Thank you, Minister. Vernon Knight, I'm actually from Mildura. My question is, why are you proceeding with an interdepartmental committee of inquiry into a second casino licence, which, if approved, would betray the commitment of the Premier to no second licence without bipartisan support?
I don't know what the sentiment in Mildura is. I haven't been to Mildura. I'm not spending a lot of my time on this issue. This is a proposition that was put to us. It wasn't one where we went out and said to the community, what about a casino in Mildura? In the time I've been Minister, I've probably come across 4 or 5 different proposals for another casino, and the legislation in Victoria doesn't prevent that. So it is a live question at some point, what's government's position going to be? We set up an interdepartmental committee to answer some of the questions that were being posed as a consequence of that consortium bowling up the proposition. They are different from some of the other proposals that have been made in that they're not a flash-in-the-pan operation. We've had some that are not worth the paper they're written on. They're very much fly-by-nighters. I think this is slightly different. What we said was, what the interdepartmental committee concluded, and it's not so surprising, is that you wouldn't be able to have a second casino without specific legislation. You'd need, if someone was going to invest what was required, they'd need an Act of Parliament that said, here is your guarantee that this thing will be around for as long as the Parliament says. That can only happen if you have a number of people in the Parliament prepared to entertain under what circumstances a casino licence beyond Crowns might be granted. Given that the other side have said no, it won't happen. It won't happen. But it's perfectly proper to set up an interdepartmental committee to get advice when a proposal has been floated by others and for which we're being asked questions on. I don't think there's anything unusual about that.
Can I just ask you to repeat, given the other side has said no, you're saying it won't happen?
Well, it can't happen. At the moment we have 19 seats in an upper house of 40. I'd love to think that we'll have more than 20 come the election, after the election. That's possibly not going to happen. If the other sides are saying under no circumstances would a casino be granted through legislation, I can't see how it could happen. I guess the only point is, I'd say that the discussion could have gone on to the point of saying what are the different ways in which a casino could be configured. And I don't assume for a minute that it could only be configured in a way of, here's a new casino with hundreds and hundreds of more poker machines in Mildura. I'm not suggesting. I don't think that's the only permutation. But we won't get to have that discussion because the other side has said, and the possibility is they'll have the numbers in the Parliament, so we won't be taking this any further.